Australian system is actually set up as a federation. So we have a Commonwealth government, but then we have 6 state and 2 territory governments. And rail safety regulation has always come under the state and territory government. So we've had 7 rail safety regulators across Australia. So obviously that made it very difficult for rail companies who worked across more than one border. Many of them were accredited in 4 or 5 different states across Australia. So that made it very difficult. Our Council of Australian Governments, which are the premiers of each of the states and territories and the Prime Minister, made a decision back in 2009 to actually set up one national rail safety regulator for Australia. Now, for that to happen, that actually means that legislation has to pass in every single one of those state and territory parliaments. So it's obviously taken some time to put it into place, and the National Rail Safety Regulator started in January 2013. And we're slowly but surely transitioning the states in, of which Queensland will be the final state we bring on board next year in 2017. But obviously, because each of the states and territories had their own regulator, they had very good rail safety regulatory systems. And of course, when you're bringing that together, each of them had some slight differences. And it's going through that process of setting up one system to apply right across Australia. And that obviously brings about its problems, and you need to actually work through those. One of the ways of getting through that is having engagement at the most senior level of governments across Australia, and that's what helped us achieve that outcome. But of course, whenever you're going through this sort of reform, it's change, and when that size change occurs, you impact people. So you always have to be aware of the people issues. People's jobs were changing, so obviously that's part of the challenge of that sort of reform as well. But again, we moved through that with support at the senior levels and finally got ONSA in place in 2013. My first piece of advice would be to try to avoid doing things differently in different states and different countries. Railways need a seamless system from start to finish, not just from an operations perspective, but also from a regulation perspective and where they get their permissions to operate. So if you can avoid setting up a system where you have different legislation and different requirements in every state and in every country, then that makes for a more economic railway system. So that would be my first piece of advice. And look, my second piece is to actually engage at that most senior level. If you don't have senior levels of government supporting the setup of the regulation and to ensure that it's seamless, then it's very difficult to achieve that outcome. And thirdly, I'd say don't try to make it perfect from the very first day. If you do that, you'll still be debating probably in 5 to 10 years' time. So get it as close as you can, but be prepared to review the legislation and the setup as time goes on.